Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments. A young woman walking home from her night shift at a local diner never imagined that stopping to help a stranger bleeding on the sidewalk would change both their lives forever. What started as a simple act of human kindness in the darkness of a cold winter night would bloom into a love story that defied all odds, survived impossible challenges, and proved that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. This isn't just another romance. This is the true story of Maya and James, two souls who found each other when both had given up on finding anyone at all. It's about second chances, about healing from trauma, about learning to trust again when the world has broken you down. It's about discovering that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, in hospital waiting rooms and shared cups of coffee, in gentle words spoken in the dark, and hands held through the hardest moments of life. Get ready for a journey that will remind you why we never stop believing in the power of human connection, even when everything seems lost. Maya Chen pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked down the empty street. The late February wind cut through the city like a knife, carrying the scent of snow and exhaust fumes. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and her feet ached from another long shift at Danny's diner. The neon signs from closed shops flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on the cracked sidewalk. She had been working double shifts for 3 months now, ever since her mother's medical bills started piling up. The cancer treatments were expensive, and Maya's part-time job at the community college library wasn't enough. At 24, she felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her narrow shoulders. Her friends had stopped inviting her out months ago, tired of hearing, "I can't afford it," or "I have to work." Maya didn't blame them. She was tired of her own excuses, too. The street was unusually quiet for a Friday night. Most of the bars had closed an hour ago, sending their customers stumbling home or into waiting taxis. Maya preferred it this way. The silence gave her time to think, to plan how she would stretch her paycheck to cover rent, groceries, and her mother's prescription medications. She was mentally calculating whether she could skip lunch for the rest of the week when she heard it, a low, pained moan coming from the alley between Murphy's hardware store and the old laundromat. Maya stopped walking. Her first instinct was to keep going. This wasn't the safest neighborhood, especially not at this hour. Her grandmother had always told her to mind her own business, to keep her head down and get home safely. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and something in Maya's chest tightened. She had always been the kind of person who stopped to help lost tourists find their way, who donated her last $5 to homeless shelters, who couldn't walk past a crying child without asking if they needed help. Her mother called it her bleeding heart. Maya called it being human. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, stepping carefully toward the alley. The narrow space between the buildings was filled with dumpsters and cardboard boxes, the walls covered in graffiti and old concert posters. The smell of garbage and stale beer hung heavy in the air. There, slumped against the brick wall about 10 feet in, was a man. Maya's breath caught in her throat. He was young, maybe her age or a little older, wearing a blood-soaked white t-shirt and dark jeans. His dark hair was matted with something that looked like blood, and his face was pale as paper. One of his hands pressed against his side, and Maya could see dark liquid seeping between his fingers. "Oh my God," she whispered, rushing toward him. Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open. They were a deep brown, almost black in the dim light, and filled with a pain that went deeper than whatever physical injury he was nursing. He tried to speak but only managed a weak cough that brought up specks of blood. Maya knelt beside him, her nursing classes from community college kicking in. She had dropped out after 1 semester when the money ran out, but she remembered enough to know this was serious. The bleeding, the pale skin, the way he was struggling to stay conscious. This man needed help immediately. "My name is Maya," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady even though her heart was pounding. "I'm going to call 911, okay? You're going to be fine." She dialed the emergency number with shaking fingers, giving the dispatcher the address and describing the situation. The woman on the phone told her the ambulance would arrive in 8 to 10 minutes and asked her to stay on the line. "What's your name?" Maya asked the injured man, pressing her scarf against the wound on his side to try to slow the bleeding. The fabric was quickly soaked through, but she kept the pressure steady. "James," he managed to whisper. His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in hours. "James Murphy." "James, I need you to stay awake for me, okay? Keep talking. Tell me what happened." James closed his eyes for a moment, and Maya thought she might lose him. Then he opened them again, focusing on her face with what seemed like tremendous effort. "3 guys," he said slowly, "jumped me outside the bar. Took my wallet, my phone. One of them had a knife." Maya felt anger flare in her chest. She had heard about the recent muggings in the neighborhood, but seeing the result up close made her sick. James looked like a good person. There was something gentle about his face, even twisted with pain. He didn't deserve this. "Do you have family I can call?" she asked. "Someone who should know you're hurt?" James shook his head slightly, then winced as the movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "No family, just me." Something in the way he said it broke Maya's heart. She recognized that particular kind of loneliness, the weight of facing the world without a safety net. She had felt it herself plenty of times, especially during the long nights when her mother was too sick to talk, and Maya felt utterly alone. The sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as they approached. Maya kept talking to James, asking him about anything she could think of to keep him conscious. She learned that he was 26 years old, that he worked construction for a small company across town, that he had been at Mickey's Tavern celebrating a coworker's birthday when the attack happened. "Why did you stop?" James asked suddenly, his eyes searching her face. Most people would have kept walking. Maya considered the question. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just couldn't leave you here alone." The paramedics arrived with a rush of activity and bright lights. Maya stepped back as they took over, watching as they checked James's vital signs and prepared him for transport. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, asked Maya what had happened and whether she was injured too. "I'm fine," Maya said. "I just found him and called for help." "You probably saved his life," the paramedic told her. "He's lost a lot of blood." A few more minutes and it might have been too late. As they loaded James onto the stretcher, he caught Maya's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were more alert than they had been before. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know how to repay you. Just get better," Maya said, squeezing his hand gently. "That's enough." She watched the ambulance disappear into the night, its red and white lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Then she stood alone in the alley, her scarf and jacket stained with blood, wondering if she would ever see James Murphy again. The walk home took another 15 minutes, and Maya spent every step thinking about the man she had just helped. There had been something about him, something that stayed with her even after he was gone. Maybe it was the way he had thanked her, as if kindness was something rare and precious in his world. Maybe it was the loneliness she had recognized in his voice when he said he had no family to call. By the time Maya reached her small apartment, dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon. She stood in her tiny bathroom, washing James's blood from her hands and watching the pink water swirl down the drain. In a few hours, she would have to get up and go to her Saturday shift at the library. Life would go on the same as always. But something had changed tonight. Maya couldn't quite name what it was, but she felt it in her chest, warm and unsettling at the same time. For the first time in months, she had done something that mattered. She had saved someone's life. As she finally fell into bed, Maya found herself hoping that James was okay, that the doctors had been able to help him, that he wasn't alone in some sterile hospital room. She wondered if she should try to find out which hospital they had taken him to, if it would be weird to visit someone she barely knew. Maya fell asleep still thinking about those dark eyes and the way James had looked at her, like she was some kind of angel. She dreamed of brick walls and blood-stained scarves, of sirens and gentle voices in the dark. When she woke up 4 hours later, she realized she had made a decision. She was going to find James Murphy. Maya spent her Saturday shift at the library distracted and unfocused. She kept thinking about James, wondering how he was doing, whether the surgery had gone well, whether he was in pain. Every time someone walked through the doors, she looked up hopefully, as if James might somehow materialize among the weekend readers and college students. During her lunch break, Maya called the 3 major hospitals in the area, The first two had no record of a James Murphy being admitted the night before. The third, City General, confirmed that they had a patient by that name, but couldn't give her any information about his condition due to privacy laws. "Are you family?" the receptionist asked. "No, I'm the person who found him and called the ambulance," Maya explained. "I just wanted to make sure he's okay. I'm sorry, but I can only release information to immediate family members. If you'd like to visit, visiting hours are from 2 to 8 p.m. Maya thanked her and hung up, feeling both relieved and nervous. James was alive and at City General. That was a start. The question now was whether she had the courage to actually go see him. The rest of her shift dragged by. Maya tried to focus on checking out books and helping patrons find research materials, but her mind kept wandering. What would she say to James? Would he want to see her? Would it be weird for a stranger to show up at his hospital room? By the time Maya's shift ended at 2 o'clock, she had convinced herself that visiting James was the right thing to do. After all, he had no family. Someone should check on him, make sure he had everything he needed. It was just basic human decency. City General Hospital was a sprawling brick building on the east side of town, surrounded by parking lots and medical office buildings. Maya had been there several times with her mother for various appointments and treatments. The familiar smell of disinfectant and floor wax hit her as soon as she walked through the automatic doors. The volunteer at the information desk was an elderly woman with silver hair and a warm smile. She looked up James's room number without any fuss, directing Maya to the elevator and the 4th floor. "He's in room 412, she said. "Take a right when you get off the elevator, then follow the hallway to the end." Maya's hands were shaking as she pressed the button for the 4th floor. What if James didn't remember her? What if he was sleeping? What if he didn't want visitors? Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway lined with identical doors. Maya could hear the sounds of the hospital around her. Beeping monitors, quiet conversations, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors. She took a deep breath and knocked softly on the door. "Come in," came a familiar voice from inside. Maya pushed open the door and stepped into the room. James was sitting up in bed, looking much better than he had the night before. His color had returned, and although he had bandages wrapped around his torso and a small cut on his forehead, he was clearly on the mend. His dark eyes widened when he saw her. "Maya," he said, and his face broke into the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "You came. I wanted to make sure you were okay," Maya said, suddenly feeling shy. "I hope that's all right. I can leave if you'd rather rest." "No, please stay." James gestured to the chair beside his bed. "I've been hoping you would come. I wanted to thank you properly." Maya sat down, noticing the small stack of get well cards on James's bedside table. "Looks like you have plenty of visitors," she said. James glanced at the cards and shrugged. "Those are from the guys at work. My boss brought them by this morning. But you're the first actual visitor I've had." There was that loneliness again, the thing Maya had heard in his voice the night before. She found herself wanting to ask about it, to understand why someone who seemed so kind had no family or close friends. But it felt too personal, too soon. Instead, she asked about his injuries and his recovery. James explained that he had needed surgery to repair internal bleeding, but the doctors said he would make a full recovery. He would be in the hospital for a few more days, then home to rest for several weeks. "The worst part is missing work," James said. "Construction doesn't come with paid sick leave. I'll be okay eventually, but the next few weeks are going to be tight." Maya nodded sympathetically. She understood financial stress all too well. What about the guys who did this? Did the police catch them? James's expression darkened. "No, and they probably never will. I couldn't give them much of a description. It was dark, and everything happened so fast. Besides, guys like that..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Let's talk about something else." They spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. Maya learned that James had grown up in foster care, aging out of the system at 18 with nowhere to go and no family to fall back on. He had worked various jobs before finding steady work in construction, which he actually enjoyed despite the physical demands. "There's something satisfying about building things," he told her. "Taking raw materials and turning them into something useful, something that will last. Most of the time, anyway." Maya told him about her mother's illness, about working multiple jobs to pay for treatments, about dropping out of nursing school. She found herself opening up to James in a way she hadn't with anyone in months. There was something about him that made her feel safe, understood. "You were studying to be a nurse?" James asked. "That makes sense. You were so calm last night, so sure of what to do. I thought maybe you were already a nurse or a doctor." "I only finished one semester before I had to quit," Maya said. "Maybe someday I'll go back, when things are more stable." "You should," James said seriously. "You're a natural. You saved my life, Maya. I don't think I've thanked you enough for that." Maya felt her cheeks warm. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," James said firmly. "They wouldn't have. I've been on my own for a long time, and I can tell you that most people look the other way when someone needs help. What you did was special." The afternoon flew by. A nurse came in to check on James and bring him dinner, smiling at Maya and commenting on how much better James looked with company. Maya realized she had been there for almost 3 hours and probably should get home to check on her mother. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "But I'm glad you're doing better. The nurse said you might go home in a couple of days, Tuesday or Wednesday if everything keeps healing well." James hesitated, then asked, "Would it be okay if I called you? When I get out, I mean. I'd like to take you to dinner or something to thank you." Maya felt her heart skip. "You don't need to thank me with dinner, but I'd like it if you called." She wrote her phone number on a piece of paper from her purse, including her address, in case he needed anything while he was recovering. James folded the paper carefully and put it in the drawer of his bedside table like it was something precious. "I'll call you as soon as I get home," he promised. Maya walked home through the early evening air, feeling lighter than she had in months. There was something about James Murphy that intrigued her, his quiet strength, his gratitude, the way he had survived being alone in the world without becoming bitter or hard. She found herself looking forward to his call, to learning more about the man she had rescued from that dark alley. She had no idea that in saving James's life, she had set in motion a love story that would change both of their lives forever. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she had something to look forward to besides work and worry and endless responsibilities. Maya Chen had always been the kind of person who helped others without expecting anything in return. She never could have imagined that this time, the person she helped would end up helping her right back. James called on a Thursday evening, 5 days after he had been discharged from the hospital. Maya was sitting at her kitchen table going through a stack of her mother's medical bills and trying not to panic about the growing pile of debt, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant debt collectors or telemarketers. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Maya? It's James Murphy, from the hospital." Maya's face broke into a smile despite her stress. "James, how are you feeling? Are you home?" "Yeah, I've been home since Tuesday. I'm doing much better thanks to you." His voice was stronger than it had been in the hospital, more confident. "I was wondering if you might want to get coffee sometime. Nothing fancy. I know a little place that makes great sandwiches too, if you're hungry." Maya looked at the bills spread across her table, at the calculator showing numbers that made her stomach clench with anxiety. She had been working so much lately that she couldn't remember the last time she had done anything just for fun. Coffee with James sounded wonderful, but she wasn't sure she could afford even a simple cafe meal. "I'd like that," she said carefully, "but I should probably mention that I'm pretty broke right now. I can swing coffee, but—" "My treat," James said quickly. "It's the least I can do. Besides, I owe you dinner, remember? Consider this a down payment." Maya felt a warm flutter in her chest. "In that case, yes, I'd love to get coffee with you." They arranged to meet on Saturday afternoon at a place called Rosie's Cafe, a small family-owned restaurant about halfway between their apartments. Maya spent Friday evening trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on her favorite jeans and a soft blue sweater that her mother always said brought out her eyes. Rosie's Cafe turned out to be exactly the kind of place Maya loved, warm and cozy, with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh bread hanging in the air. James was already there when she arrived. sitting at a corner table and looking much healthier than he had the last time she saw him. He was wearing a dark green button-down shirt that made his brown eyes look almost amber, and when he smiled at her, Maya felt that flutter in her chest again. "You look beautiful," James said as she sat down across from him, and Maya felt herself blush. "You look pretty good yourself, considering you were half dead a week ago." James laughed, a rich sound that made Maya want to hear it again. "I feel like a new person. The doctor said I was lucky you found me when you did. A few more minutes and—" He shook his head. "Well, let's just say I owe you everything." They ordered coffee and sandwiches, falling into conversation as easily as they had in the hospital. Maya learned that James lived in a small studio apartment, about 10 minutes from where she had found him, that he had been working for the same construction company for 3 years, that he spent most of his free time reading or working on small woodworking projects. "I'm making a bookshelf right now," he told her. "Well, I was before this happened. It'll be another week or two before I can do any heavy lifting." "You like to read?" Maya asked, genuinely surprised. She had never met a construction worker who talked about books. "Love it. Always have, even as a kid." Books were— James paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When I was in foster care, books were how I escaped. Libraries were safe places where no one could bother me. I must have read every book in 3 different branch libraries by the time I aged out." Maya felt her heart squeeze. She had grown up with loving parents, a stable home, family vacations, and birthday parties. She couldn't imagine what it must have been like for James, moving from home to home, never knowing if he belonged anywhere. "What kind of books do you like?" she asked. "Everything, really. History, science fiction, biographies. Right now I'm reading about the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. Did you know they used compressed air chambers to dig the foundations? Men would work underwater for hours at a time. A lot of them got sick from the pressure changes." Maya found herself drawn in by James's enthusiasm, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something that interested him. She had always loved learning new things, and James seemed to have an endless curiosity about the world. "What about you?" James asked. "When you're not working 2 jobs and going to school, what do you like to do?" Maya realized with some embarrassment that she couldn't remember the last time she had done anything purely for enjoyment. "I used to paint," she said slowly. "Watercolors, mostly. Landscapes and flowers. I haven't had time for it in, probably 2 years now." "Why not? Time, money, energy, take your pick." Maya shrugged, trying to sound casual about something that had once meant the world to her. "Art supplies are expensive, and between work and taking care of my mom, what kind of landscapes?" James asked, and Maya was touched that he seemed genuinely interested. "Mostly places I'd seen around the city, the park in different seasons, old buildings, street scenes. Nothing fancy, just moments I wanted to capture." Maya surprised herself by how much she missed it. There was something peaceful about it, you know? Sitting somewhere quiet and really looking at the world, trying to translate what I saw onto paper. "I'd love to see some of your paintings sometime." Maya felt that flutter again, stronger this time. "Maybe," she said, "if I can find them. They're packed away somewhere." They talked for 2 hours, their coffee growing cold as they shared stories and discovered surprising connections. James had worked on the renovation of the library, where Maya had her part-time job. Maya had volunteered at the community center where James occasionally helped with literacy programs for adults. They had been moving in similar circles for months without ever meeting. "It's funny how life works," James said as they prepared to leave. "If those guys hadn't mugged me, if you hadn't been walking home at exactly the right time, if you hadn't been brave enough to stop and help, we never would have met." "I don't know if I was brave," Maya said. "I was terrified the whole time." "Courage isn't about not being afraid," James said. "It's about doing the right thing even when you are afraid. What you did for me, that was real courage, Maya." Outside the cafe, they stood on the sidewalk for a moment, neither wanting to end the afternoon. The late February air was still cold, but Maya could smell the promise of spring underneath the winter chill. "I had a really good time," James said. "Would you maybe want to do this again, soon?" "I'd like that," Maya said, and meant it completely. James walked her to the bus stop, waiting with her until her bus arrived. As Maya settled into her seat and watched him wave through the window, she realized that something important was happening to her. For the first time in years, she was interested in someone. Really interested. In the way that made her stomach flutter and her heart race. The feeling was both exciting and terrifying. Maya had dated a little in college, but nothing serious. She had always been too focused on her studies, too worried about her future, to invest much emotional energy in relationships. And since her mother's diagnosis, she had convinced herself that she didn't have time for romance. But James was different. There was something about him that made her want to make time, to rearrange her priorities, to believe that maybe she deserved happiness too. Over the next few weeks, Maya and James fell into a comfortable routine. They met for coffee every Saturday afternoon, their conversations growing deeper and more personal with each meeting. James told her about his childhood in foster care, about the loneliness and uncertainty that had shaped him into someone who was fiercely independent, but also deeply grateful for any kindness shown to him. Maya shared her fears about her mother's illness, her guilt over dropping out of nursing school, her exhaustion from working so many hours just to keep up with medical bills. James listened without judgment, offering comfort and support in ways that no one else in Maya's life had. "You're doing everything you can," he told her one afternoon when she was particularly discouraged about a new round of expensive treatments. "Your mom is lucky to have someone who cares so much." "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her," Maya admitted. "Like I should be doing more, earning more, finding better doctors or treatments or something." "Maya, you gave up school to take care of her. You work 16-hour days. You've devoted your entire life to making sure she gets the care she needs. That's not failing, that's love." It was the first time anyone had helped Maya see her sacrifices as something noble, rather than just necessary. Her friends had mostly drifted away, unable to understand why she couldn't just go out and have fun, like other people their age. Her extended family meant well, but they lived far away and could only offer sympathy and small checks that barely made a dent in the medical costs. James was different. He understood what it meant to face the world alone, to take on responsibilities that felt too big, to make hard choices because there was no one else to make them. He never made Maya feel guilty for the time they spent together, never complained when she had to cancel plans because of work or her mother's needs. More than that, James found ways to help without making Maya feel like charity. He started bringing coffee and pastries when they met, always insisting he had gotten too much food and didn't want it to go to waste. He showed up at Maya's apartment one Saturday with groceries, claiming his work had given him a gift card that was about to expire. "You don't have to take care of me," Maya told him, though she was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'm not taking care of you," James said. "I'm sharing what I have with someone I care about. There's a difference." Maya's mother, Helen, met James for the first time on a Sunday afternoon in early April. Maya had been nervous about introducing them. Her mother had always been protective, skeptical of the few boyfriends Maya had brought home over the years. But Helen took to James immediately. "He has kind eyes," she told Maya later while James was in the kitchen making tea for all of them. "And he looks at you like you're precious. I like that." James seemed genuinely interested in Helen, asking about her artwork. She had been a high school art teacher before her illness, and listening to her stories about Maya's childhood with obvious delight. He brought Helen flowers every time he visited, small bouquets from the grocery store that she treasured as if they were rare orchids. "Your young man is good for you," Helen told Maya one evening after James had left. "You smile more when he's around. You laugh. I hadn't realized how much I missed hearing you laugh." Maya realized her mother was right. For months, she had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day and paying each bill, that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be happy. James reminded her that she was more than just a caregiver and a worker. She was a woman with dreams and desires and the right to joy. By May, Maya and James were spending most of their free time together. James had fully recovered from his injuries and was back to work, but he made sure to save his weekends for Maya. They explored different neighborhoods in the city, visited museums during free admission hours, had picnics in the park with sandwiches from home. James never pressured Maya for more than she was ready to give. Their relationship progressed slowly, built on friendship and genuine affection rather than passion alone. They held hands while walking, shared gentle kisses goodnight, but James seemed to understand instinctively that Maya needed time to trust, to believe that this wonderful thing happening to her was real and lasting. The first time Maya realized she was falling in love with James was on a warm Saturday in late May. They were sitting in the park, watching children play on the playground while sharing a bag of popcorn from a street vendor. James was telling her about a book he was reading, about urban planning, when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Maya asked, following his gaze to see what had distracted him. "Nothing," James said, turning back to her with a soft smile. I like listening to myself talk to you. You make me feel interesting." "You are interesting," Maya said. "You're one of the most interesting people I've ever met." "I've never had someone care about what I think before," James said quietly. "Not really. The guys at work are good people, but we don't talk about books or ideas or, I don't know, the things that matter to me. With you, I feel like I can say anything." Maya felt something shift in her chest, a deep certainty settling into place like a key finding its lock. She was in love with James Murphy. Completely, thoroughly, irrevocably in love. She loved his curiosity about the world, his gentle strength, the way he had turned a childhood of instability into an adult appreciation for simple pleasures. She loved how he made her feel seen and valued, how he had brought joy back into her life without asking her to abandon her responsibilities.
"James," she said, reaching for his hand.
"I need to tell you something." He turned to face her fully, his expression suddenly serious. "What is it?" "I think I'm falling in love with you," Maya said, her heart pounding. "Actually, I know I am. I love you." James's face went through several emotions, surprise, wonder, and finally, a joy so pure it took Maya's breath away. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I love you too," he said. "I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I didn't want to scare you away. Maya, you saved my life that night in the alley, but you've been saving it every day since then, too. You've given me something I never thought I'd have, someone to belong to, someone who belongs to me." When James kissed her there in the park, with the sound of children laughing and birds singing in the trees around them, Maya felt like her life was finally beginning. All the hardship, all the struggle, all the lonely nights and worried days had led her to this moment, to this man who understood her heart so completely. They were both quiet on the walk home, holding hands and stealing glances at each other like teenagers with their first love. Maya felt giddy and nervous and completely alive in a way she hadn't in years. Love, she realized, wasn't just about finding someone who made you happy. It was about finding someone who made you remember who you were underneath all your fears and responsibilities and daily struggles. James made her remember that she was Maya Chen, the girl who used to paint watercolor sunsets and dream of becoming a nurse. He made her believe that maybe, despite everything, those dreams were still possible. As they reached Maya's apartment building, James pulled her close for another kiss, this one deeper and more promising than any they had shared before. "What happens now?" Maya asked, her arms wrapped around his neck. "Now we figure it out together," James said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what people who love each other do. Right?" Maya nodded, feeling tears of happiness prick her eyes. She had been facing the world alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have a partner, someone who was willing to share both burdens and joys. Together, she agreed, and sealed the promise with another kiss. Neither of them knew that their love was about to face its biggest test yet, that life was about to throw them a curveball that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. But in that perfect moment, standing on the sidewalk with the evening sun painting the world golden around them, Maya and James were simply two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build something beautiful together. Love, Maya realized, really could bloom anywhere, even in the darkest alleys, even in the hardest times, even when you thought you had nothing left to give. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to stop and help, and another person grateful enough to love them back with everything they had. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in late July, just as Maya was getting ready for her shift at the library. She had been humming while she made coffee, thinking about her plans to see James that evening, when her mother's weak voice called from the bedroom. "Maya, honey, I think you need to call Dr. Peterson." Maya found her mother sitting on the edge of her bed, bent over slightly and breathing in short, shallow gasps. Helen's face was pale and drawn, and there was something in her eyes that made Maya's stomach drop with fear. "Are you in pain?" "It's hard to breathe," Helen whispered. "Started about an hour ago. I thought it would pass, but it's getting worse." Maya was already reaching for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed Dr. Peterson's office. The receptionist put her through immediately when Maya explained the situation, and Dr. Peterson's calm voice did nothing to ease the growing panic in Maya's chest. "Bring her in right away," he said. "I'll meet you at the hospital. It sounds like there might be fluid building up around her lungs. It's a complication we've been watching for." Maya called a taxi and helped her mother get dressed, her mind racing through all the possible implications of what was happening. Helen's cancer had been responding well to treatment for the past few months. Her last round of test results had been encouraging. This wasn't supposed to be happening now. At the hospital, Dr. Peterson confirmed Maya's worst fears. The cancer had spread to her mother's lungs, and fluid was indeed building up around them, making it difficult for her to breathe properly. They would need to drain the fluid immediately and start a more aggressive round of chemotherapy. "How long do we have?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she and Dr. Peterson spoke privately in the hallway outside Helen's room. Dr. Peterson's expression was kind, but honest. "It's hard to say. With the new treatment protocol, we might be able to buy several months, maybe more. But Maya, you need to understand that we're moving into palliative care now. Our focus is on keeping your mother comfortable and giving you as much quality time together as possible." Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. 6 months ago, they had been talking about remission, about Helen returning to teaching part-time, about maybe taking a small vacation when the treatments were over. Now they were talking about months instead of years, about comfort instead of cures. She sat in the hospital waiting room while her mother underwent the procedure to drain fluid from her lungs, staring at her phone and trying to figure out how to call James. They had only been together for a few months. This wasn't his burden to carry. But Maya found that more than anything, she needed to hear his voice, needed someone to remind her that she wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. James arrived at the hospital within an hour of her call, still wearing his work clothes and looking like he had run from the construction site. He found Maya in the waiting room and immediately pulled her into his arms, not caring that he was dusty and sweaty from a day of manual labor. "How is she?" he asked, stroking Maya's hair as she cried against his chest. "Not good," Maya managed to say between sobs. "The cancer has spread. Dr. Peterson says we might have a few months if the new treatments work, but..." She couldn't finish the sentence. James held her tighter. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore, Maya. You don't have to carry this by yourself." Over the next few weeks, Maya's life became a blur of hospital visits, medication schedules, and difficult conversations about the future. Helen was released after 3 days but required constant care and monitoring. Maya had to quit her job at the library to become her mother's full-time caregiver, leaving only her diner shifts to bring in any income. The financial pressure was crushing. The new treatments were experimental and not fully covered by insurance. Maya applied for every grant and assistance program she could find, but there were still gaps, still bills that arrived faster than she could pay them. She started selling her possessions, her laptop, her few pieces of jewelry, books she had treasured since college. Through it all, James was a constant presence. He came by every day after work, bringing dinner for Maya and Helen, helping with household tasks, sitting with Helen when Maya needed to shower or run errands. He never complained, never acted like Helen's illness was an inconvenience or a burden he hadn't signed up for. "You don't have to do this," Maya told him one evening after he had spent 2 hours helping Helen organize old photo albums. "This isn't what you expected when we started dating. I would understand if you need to step back." James looked at her like she had said something completely incomprehensible. Maya, I love you. That means I love your family, too. Helen isn't just your mother. She's the woman who raised the person I'm going to spend my life with. Taking care of her isn't a burden, it's an honor. Maya felt her heart break and heal at the same time. She had been so afraid that Helen's illness would drive James away that he would decide loving her wasn't worth the complications and heartache that came with it. Instead, he had stepped deeper into their lives, becoming not just Maya's boyfriend, but Helen's friend, advocate, and surrogate son. Helen, for her part, adored James completely. On her good days, when the pain medications weren't making her too drowsy, she would insist that James sit with her and tell her about his work, his books, his plans for the future. She started calling him my boy and would light up whenever he walked into the room. "He's going to make you very happy," she told Maya one afternoon while James was in the kitchen making them all grilled cheese sandwiches. "But more than that, you're going to make him happy. You've given him something he's never had before, a real family. Don't ever forget that what you have together is special, baby girl. Love like this doesn't come along very often." As summer turned to fall, Helen's condition continued to deteriorate despite the aggressive treatments. The chemotherapy made her violently sick and left her weak and exhausted. The pain medications helped, but also made her confused and distant. Maya watched her vibrant, artistic mother fade a little more each day, and it felt like her own heart was breaking piece by piece. The worst part was the helplessness. Maya had always been the kind of person who solved problems, who worked harder when things got difficult, who found ways to make impossible situations manageable. But cancer didn't care how hard she worked or how much she loved her mother. It followed its own timeline, indifferent to Maya's desperation and prayers. James became Maya's anchor during the darkest days. When she was too exhausted to think clearly, he made sure she ate and slept. When she was overwhelmed by medical decisions, he helped her research options and ask the right questions. When she broke down crying in the middle of the night, he held her and let her grieve without trying to fix anything or make her feel better with empty platitudes. "I don't know how to do this," Maya whispered to him one night as they lay in bed listening to Helen's labored breathing through the baby monitor they had set up. "I don't know how to watch her die. I don't know how to let go." "You don't have to know," James said softly. "You just have to love her, which you already do perfectly. Everything else we'll figure out as we go." In October, Dr. Peterson called Maya into his office for a meeting she had been dreading. Helen's latest scans showed that the cancer had continued to spread despite the treatments. "It was time," he said gently, "to stop the chemotherapy and focus entirely on making her comfortable." "How long?" Maya asked, the question that had become the center of her world. "Weeks, maybe a month or two if we're fortunate," Peterson said. "I'm sorry, Maya. I know this isn't what any of us hoped for." Maya called James from the parking lot of the medical center, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. He left work immediately and found her sitting in her car, shaking with grief and shock. "We need to tell her," Maya said when she had finally calmed down enough to talk. "She has the right to know, to make her own decisions about what she wants." Helen took the news with more grace than Maya had expected. She nodded quietly while Dr. Peterson explained the situation, asked a few practical questions about pain management and home hospice care, and then requested a few minutes alone with Maya and James. "Well," she said when the doctor had left them alone in the examination room, "I suppose that settles it. We need to make the most of whatever time we have left." Maya started to cry again, but Helen reached over and took her hand firmly. "None of that now," she said with some of her old teacher authority. "We have work to do. I want to go home and see my garden one more time. I want to finish the scrapbook I've been making of your childhood photos, and I want to talk to James about something very important." That evening, while Maya was in the kitchen making tea, Helen called James over to her bedside. Maya could hear them talking quietly but couldn't make out the words. When James emerged a few minutes later, his eyes were red and his expression was serious. "What did she want to talk to you about?" Maya asked. James glanced back toward Helen's room, then pulled Maya into his arms. "She wanted to give me something," he said, opening his hand to reveal Helen's engagement ring, a simple solitaire diamond that Maya's father had given her 30 years ago. Maya gasped. "James, she didn't. She said she wanted to make sure I had it for when the time was right." James said quietly, She said she knows we haven't talked about marriage yet, but she can see how much we love each other, and she wants to know that part of her will be with us when we start our life together. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, tears of grief and love and overwhelming gratitude for having two people in her life who cared so much about her happiness. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she whispered. James got down on one knee right there in the kitchen, holding Helen's ring between them like a promise. "I know the timing isn't perfect," he said. "I know we're in the middle of the hardest thing you've ever faced. But Maya, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I want to be your husband, your partner, your family for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" Maya didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, pulling him up to kiss her. "Yes, absolutely yes." Helen cried happy tears when they told her about the engagement. "Now I can rest easy," she said, "knowing that my girl is going to be loved and cherished the way she deserves." They had a small, simple wedding ceremony in Helen's bedroom 3 weeks later. Maya wore a dress she had bought for $20 at a consignment shop, and James wore his one good suit. Helen, despite being very weak by then, insisted on wearing lipstick and the pearl necklace her own mother had given her. The ceremony was conducted by Father Miguel from the local Catholic church, who had been visiting Helen regularly even though she wasn't particularly religious. Maya's coworker from the diner served as the witness, and they celebrated with cake from the grocery store bakery and champagne that James had splurged on despite their tight finances. "Welcome to the family, son," Helen told James after they had exchanged vows and rings. "Take care of my daughter. Love her enough for both of us." "I will," James promised, "every day for the rest of my life." Helen passed away peacefully on a Sunday morning in November, with Maya and James holding her hands. She had been unconscious for 2 days, but Maya liked to think she had held on just long enough to see her daughter safely married and settled with someone who would love her unconditionally. The grief was overwhelming and all-consuming. Maya felt lost without her mother's presence, without the purpose that caring for Helen had given her days. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't imagine a future that didn't revolve around doctor appointments and medication schedules. James grieved too, but his grief was different, quieter and less consuming. He had learned to cope with loss during his childhood in foster care, and he channeled his sorrow into taking care of Maya and handling the practical details of Helen's death. He arranged the funeral, paid the outstanding medical bills with money from Helen's small life insurance policy, and helped Maya sort through 30 years of possessions and memories. "I don't know how to be happy without feeling guilty about it," Maya told him one evening as they sat in their apartment. James had moved in after the wedding to help care for Helen, and had stayed afterward to help Maya through her grief. "She wanted me to be happy, but how can I be when she's not here to see it?" "Maybe not in the way she used to, but Helen is part of you, Maya. Every time you smile, every time you laugh, every time you do something kind for another person, that's Helen living on through you. Being happy isn't betraying her memory. It's honoring it." Slowly, gradually, Maya began to heal. She returned to the diner full-time and eventually picked up a part-time job at a medical office, filing insurance claims and scheduling appointments. The work reminded her of her old dream of becoming a nurse, and she started thinking about whether it might be possible to go back to school. James encouraged her every step of the way. With Helen's medical expenses no longer draining their finances, they were able to save a little money each month. James took on extra projects at work, building custom furniture and cabinets for clients in his spare time. After a year of careful budgeting, they had saved enough for Maya to enroll in a nursing program at the local community college. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked him the night before classes started. "It's going to be 2 years of me being stressed and busy and probably not much fun to be around." James pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Maya, you saved my life in more ways than one. The least I can do is support you while you pursue your dream of saving other people's lives. Besides," he added with a grin, "you were plenty stressed when I met you, and I fell in love with you anyway." Nursing school was challenging but rewarding in ways Maya had forgotten were possible. She excelled in her classes, particularly in emergency care and trauma nursing. Her instructors praised her natural instincts and calm demeanor under pressure, skills she had developed during those terrifying moments in the alley with James, and refined during the long months of caring for her mother. James was her biggest cheerleader throughout the entire program. He helped her study for exams, brought her dinner when she was working late in the lab, and listened patiently as she practiced procedures on him. When Maya graduated with honors and passed her licensing exam on the first try, James was more proud than she had ever seen him. "You did it," he said as they celebrated at their favorite restaurant. Not Rosie's Cafe, which had closed down, but a new place that served excellent pasta and had become their special occasion spot. "You're officially a registered nurse. How does it feel?" Maya considered the question. 2 years ago, she had been an exhausted waitress with a sick mother and no prospects for the future. Now she was a married woman with a nursing degree and a job waiting for her at City General Hospital, the same hospital where she had visited James after his attack. "It feels like everything that happened was worth it," she said finally. "All the struggle, all the pain, all the times I thought I couldn't keep going. It all led me here, to this life with you." Maya's first day as a nurse was both terrifying and exhilarating. She was assigned to the emergency department. As she walked through the familiar halls in her scrubs, Maya thought about the girl she had been that night. Scared, alone, unsure of her own strength. Now she was different. Still the same person who couldn't walk past someone who needed help, but stronger, more confident, more aware of her own capabilities. She had learned that she could face the worst life had to offer and come out the other side not just intact, but transformed. Her first patient was an elderly man who had fallen and broken his hip. As Maya helped the doctor examine him and prepared him for surgery, she thought about all the people who had helped her along the way. The paramedics who had saved James, Dr. B. Peterson who had guided them through Helen's illness, the nursing instructors who had believed in her potential. "You're very good at this," the attending physician told her during a quiet moment. "You have excellent instincts. Have you considered specializing in trauma care?" Maya smiled, thinking of James and how he always said she was a natural healer. "Actually, yes. I think I'd like that very much." Over the next few months, Maya thrived in her new career. She loved the fast pace of the emergency department, the variety of cases, the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. She was exactly where she was meant to be. James, meanwhile, had been promoted to foreman at his construction company. He was overseeing the renovation of an old apartment building, turning it into affordable housing for working families. It was meaningful work that combined his practical skills with his desire to help others, and he came home each day energized and fulfilled. They had been married for almost 3 years when Maya realized she was pregnant. She found out on a Tuesday morning, staring at 2 pink lines on a test she had taken on a whim after feeling nauseated for several days running. She sat on the bathroom floor for 10 minutes, processing the news and everything it would mean for their lives. They had talked about children in abstract terms, agreeing that they wanted a family someday when they were more financially stable. Someday had apparently arrived ahead of schedule. James was at work, so Maya spent the day in a daze, going through the motions of her shift while her mind reeled with questions and possibilities. When she got home that evening, she found James in the kitchen making dinner, humming the same tune Maya had been humming the morning her mother got sick. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing her cheek as she walked in. "Life-changing," Maya said, pulling the pregnancy test out of her purse and handing it to him. James stared at the test for a long moment, his expression cycling through surprise, wonder, and pure joy. Then he dropped the test on the counter and swept Maya into his arms, spinning her around the small kitchen while she laughed. "We're having a baby," he said, setting her down gently. "Maya, we're having a baby. Are you happy?" Maya asked, suddenly nervous. "I know we didn't plan this exactly and money is still tight." "Happy?" James cupped her face in his hands, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Maya, I never thought I would have a real family. I never thought I would have someone who loved me enough to build a life with me, let alone children. You've given me everything I ever dreamed of and more." Their daughter was born on a warm day in May, exactly 4 years after Maya and James had first said they loved each other in the park. They named her Helen Maya Murphy, after both her grandmothers, and she entered the world with a loud cry that announced her determination to be heard. Maya had never experienced love like what she felt holding her daughter for the first time. It was fierce and protective and all-encompassing. Different from her love for James, but equally profound. Looking at Helen's tiny face, Maya could see traces of her mother in the shape of her eyes, echoes of James in her determined expression. "She's perfect," James whispered, stroking Helen's soft cheek with one finger. "She looks just like you." "She looks like herself," Maya said, "like she's going to change the world." As Maya recovered from childbirth and adjusted to motherhood, she thought often about the chain of events that had led to this moment. If she hadn't walked home from work that particular night, if she hadn't been brave enough to help a stranger, if James hadn't been grateful enough to fall in love with his rescuer, none of this would have existed. Their love story had begun with violence and blood, had been tested by illness and death, had been built on small kindnesses and daily choices to keep loving each other even when it was difficult. Now, it had created new life, a tiny person who would carry their love forward into the future. "Do you ever think about that night?" Maya asked James as they sat together in the nursery, watching Helen sleep in her crib. "Every day," James said. "I think about how lucky I was that you were the one who found me. Not just because you saved my life, but because you were exactly the right person to love me the way I needed to be loved." Maya leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had anchored her through every storm. "I used to think I saved you that night, but really, we saved each other." James nodded, pressing a kiss to the top of Maya's head. "And now we get to save her," he said, looking at their sleeping daughter. "We get to give her the kind of love and stability we both needed when we were young. We get to be her safe place." Maya thought about her mother, who had given her such a secure foundation of love that she had been able to extend it to a stranger in an alley. She thought about James, who had survived a childhood without that foundation and had still chosen kindness and gratitude over bitterness. She thought about all the people who had helped them along the way, doctors and nurses and teachers and friends who had shown up when they needed it most. "I want to tell her the story someday," Maya said, "about how we met, about how Grandma Helen gave us her blessing, about how love can bloom anywhere if you're willing to tend it." "We will," James promised. "We'll tell her that love isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. We'll tell her that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, if you're brave enough to look for them." As if sensing their conversation, baby Helen stirred in her sleep, making the tiny sounds that meant she was dreaming. Maya and James sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter and marveling at the beautiful, complicated, miraculous life they had built together. Maya Chen Murphy was no longer the scared young woman who had found a bleeding stranger in an alley and made the split-second decision to help. She was a wife, a mother, a registered nurse who saved lives for a living, but at her core, she was still the same person who couldn't walk past someone in need, who believed in the power of small kindnesses to change the world. James Murphy was no longer the lonely man who had grown up without a family, who had faced the world alone until the night 3 strangers decided to hurt him and 1 stranger decided to heal him. He was a husband, a father, a successful foreman building homes for other families, but at his core he was still the same person who understood that love was a gift to be treasured, that every day with the people you care about is a blessing. Together, they had created something neither could have imagined alone, a love story that had survived its darkest chapters and emerged stronger, a family built on the foundation of 2 people who had chosen to keep believing in each other no matter what life threw at them. And in her crib, baby Helen slept peacefully, surrounded by more love than she could possibly understand. The living proof that sometimes the most extraordinary things really do begin with the simple decision to stop and help when someone needs you most.